Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, but more specifically, we're going to be discussing the Bitcoin dominance. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. That sale is ending at the end of the month, so make sure you check it out, lock in the lower rate. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, you guys know I'm a big proponent of the Bitcoin dominance heading higher, not because I'm a Bitcoin maxi, but just because I think it is a cyclical component that needs to play out. We have seen it play out in the past, and I do not think that this time will be any different. A couple of weeks ago, I put out a video on the Bitcoin dominance, not because I was really planning on doing it, but because we had seen a pullback from this level here all the way back down to around 47% or so. And it did seem to some degree like crypto Twitter was losing their collective mind over this pullback. But remember, in this general thesis, right, it's a sort of this macro view, is that the dominance will head higher. You are, of course, going to have consolidation periods before further breakouts. The consolidations, the brief pullbacks should not detract from the overall view. So try not to lose sight of the general trend. Try not to miss the forest for the trees. The idea here is that the dominance will continue higher, and as we have said for a long time, it should head higher no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. And I want to make that clear. The reason we talk about this is because when it comes to investing in crypto, you must always consider your opportunity cost. You must always consider what risk are you taking on. And the whole idea is if the collective altcoin market is bleeding back to Bitcoin, then what is the point, in my opinion, of course, not financial advice, but what's the point of taking too many risky investments in the altcoin market when the dominance is just on a pretty compelling train to the upside? You're essentially taking on more risk for less reward. Now, I will say there are some altcoins that can and will outperform Bitcoin. And I've said that for a long time. What we're talking about is collectively, the altcoin market as a whole will generally not outperform Bitcoin during this phase of the cycle, at least not in a sustained way. Any given day or any given week, there can be reversions to sort of the mean trend, but it doesn't mean, it should not detract again from the overall theory. So let's try to make sure we understand that there will be pullbacks along the way, but it does not mean that the dominance is not ultimately heading much higher. And we've talked about this for a long time. I mean, it was only a few months ago when so many people in crypto were calling for the dominance to break down to new lows, and saying things like the altcoin market was just different this time, and that Bitcoin dominance was going to go to 20 or 30%. But as I've said many times, an inconvenient truth for a lot of people to accept is that the dominance was higher this cycle, even at the lows, than it ever was in 2018, or than it was in 2018, right? In 2018, the dominance went all the way down to 35 or 36%. But so far, we haven't seen it go back below that level. Now, that's not to say that it won't ever go back below that level. But what I am saying is that in the short to medium term, the trend for the Bitcoin dominance, in my opinion, not financial advice, right, but in my opinion, still very much remains to the upside. And we are coming up on a very critical level. If you follow this channel a couple weeks ago, we were doing a live stream sort of following this move right here to around that 49% level. And the whole idea is that Bitcoin dominance needs to break the prior range high. All right. Now, the prior range high is around 49%, right? I mean, if you go look at some of the hourly candles back over here in July of 2021, there were some hourly candles on the Bitcoin dominance that took it up to like 49.2% or somewhere around that area. So we still need to break that. But furthermore, not only do we need to break that, but we need to hold it as support and continue higher, right? If it's just a wick above and then we come back down, it's meaningless. We need to see a sustained move to the upside And the reason is that it collectively breaks the altcoin market off of their Bitcoin support levels. One of the things that I've said for a long time, and it's a very subtle shift, but it's again, it's the idea that no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD, the market is slowly evolving into a market where the altcoin market bleeds back to Bitcoin in general, whether Bitcoin is going up or down. Take a look at the last couple of weeks. Bitcoin USD over the last 2 weeks has been red and then green. Of course, we don't have the full weekly candle close yet, but at least as of at least a day before the weekly close, this candle is green, and last week's was red. Note that the last 2 weekly red candles for the Ether Bitcoin pair have both been red, right? So Bitcoin went down and then Bitcoin went up, but Ethereum's Bitcoin valuation just went down both weeks. And again, I mean, you might say that's cherry picking, and to some degree that's true, but there's also this idea for even Ethereum, which has held up fairly well given the circumstances. But again, and I've said this before, right? This is somewhat of an inconvenient truth itself for a lot of people, is that this is just a series of lower highs, and that's all it's really been for quite a long period of time. I mean, even the merge rally was just a lower high, right, as compared to the end of 2021. And then we had a lower high at the merge in September 2022, and then a lower high in October, and then a lower high in January, and then a lower high in March, and then a lower high in April. And every single time we see this rally by the Ethereum Bitcoin pair, I get called out on Twitter, and people say all sorts of things. But then at the end of the day, all that it was accomplished was more liquidity was sucked back in just so it could be simped back out to Bitcoin, right? This is something we've seen happen in cycles before us. So it really shouldn't be that, I don't really understand why it's such a such a sort of like this view to have that no one is willing to accept. I mean, it doesn't really seem like it's too novel of a concept, because this is what's happened in the past as well, and we can see it happening once again. 0.08, I mean, over here is 0.088, then 0.085, then 0.078, then 0.07, a little 0.078 again. This was closer to 0.079, and then this one here was 0.073, and then this recent one was about 0.071. And it's a slow and painful process, admittedly, but it's just been a series of lower highs. And recently we put in a new low as measured compared to the October low. Now we still, of course, need to take out this low down here in June of 2022, but I do fully believe that it will happen. Now, one of the things that I've mentioned for the dominance again is that it should go up no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. Now, during the last cycle where we saw the Bitcoin dominance rally and take out the prior range high, right? It was also on a Bitcoin USD pump, right? I mean, it was the same thing. I mean, yes, some people don't like that I compare this move to 2018, but again, I've said before, even if you compare it to 2019, Bitcoin dominance continued higher even after the local high for Bitcoin USD was in. If you don't believe me, let's just pull it up, right? Bitcoin USD, put it on a new price scale, and you can see pretty clearly here that Bitcoin peaked here in June. But even though Bitcoin peaked in June, where the dominance was around 64%, the dominance still rallied until about 73% or so. I mean, you're talking about another 10% or so, almost 10% after Bitcoin USD had topped in June. And if you compare it to 2018, you can see that it was this Bitcoin rally right here that broke this resistance, right? It was that Bitcoin rally there that sort of took us above this resistance level that was previously, we previously came down from. And then once we got above that resistance level, you can see that Bitcoin dominance continued to go up, even though Bitcoin USD was going down / sideways, right? I mean, it didn't just go down monotonically, right? It went down and then back up, and then it just sort of slowly did something like that. Not really, it was a very boring time in crypto. I remember it quite vividly. And during this entire time, the dominance just continued to go higher, even though Bitcoin was just putting in a series of lower highs. So, you know, regardless of whether you want to compare it to 2018 or 2019, the point is that at this phase of the cycle, historically anyways, Bitcoin sucks in liquidity from the rest of the market. And it's an important part because during the halving year, having this liquidity back in the blue chip, right, at least the main blue chip, should help create a more healthy environment for the entire asset class as a whole. And this is why I continue to say, at least for myself, I'm not trying to say what you should or should not do, but at least for myself, the altcoin market is still too risky relative to Bitcoin. Now, again, I mean, some altcoins have done well. They're up on their USD pairs. But again, it doesn't change the fact that most of them just simply continue to bleed back to Bitcoin time and time again. And I mean, again, Ethereum is one example, but it is certainly not the only example. ADA Bitcoin continues to just do the same thing. One lower high after another. Every single time people get excited. So far, more or less, it's just been rejections off the bull market support band. Now, sometimes we did break above it, but ultimately it was a failed breakout. And again, I mean, every single time, ADA Bitcoin is just putting in one lower high after another. Every single time, people get excited about this move, and it just ends up being a lower high. And ADA Bitcoin, by the way, put in a new low for this cycle here as recently as a month ago. Right? I mean, as recently as a month ago. And look at Bitcoin. It's putting in new lows this week, you know? I mean, literally this week, Bitcoin has been putting in new lows. And inevitably, whenever it bounces off of the trend line, right? Whenever it bounces off of this trend line right here, which I don't know what it's going to happen, but whenever it does, it will probably it'll probably make some people call for, oh, this is going to go back up. But in reality, it's probably just going to be another lower high. Now, of course, there's a tricky situation here because at some point, some of these altcoins, it will not just be a lower high, right? Like they will bounce and it could be a sustained bounce for, more than just a month or two, right? It could be a sustained bounce for a year or more for all we know. But the point is, if you look at last cycle, a lot of altcoins didn't really bottom out against Bitcoin until Q3 at the earliest. Now, there were of 2019. Now, there were some that bottomed out before then, but a lot of altcoins, including Ethereum, by the way, which I don't really consider an alt, but including Ethereum, did not bottom until the end of the third quarter of the pre-halving year. So for this time, that would correspond to, say, September of 2023 before we could start to realistically expect that a lot of the altcoin market has actually put in a compelling bottom on Bitcoin. And again, many of them just bleed forever. I mean, that's just a reality that I think a lot of people need to accept. But again, Bitcoin, just one lower high after another. And I'm sure whenever the next lower high is going to occur, it's probably just going to be another lower high, right? Link Bitcoin is another example. I mean, it is sort of coming back into these prior lows over here. But again, I mean, it had this rally, and then it's just been putting in one lower high after another after a series of lower highs from back over here, right? I mean, going all the way back to 2020, this has just been a series of lower highs, and it's just been a fairly compelling bleed back to Bitcoin. The uni Bitcoin valuation, right? Again, just a series of lower highs. The Litecoin Bitcoin valuation, yeah, I mean, it had a nice little rally here against Bitcoin at the end of 2022. But even since then, I mean, you can still see it's been putting in lower highs. Furthermore, this is a great example of showing you how while some of these, some of the time they can see a pretty nice bounce that can last for more than just a month, it doesn't really change the fact that some of the altcoins just bleed against Bitcoin over the macro scale. Like, I know this is a thing that a lot of people don't want to accept, and it took me a long time to really accept it myself, in a cycle before us. But once you accept it, it actually makes navigating crypto a lot easier. And that way, when you are investing in the altcoin market, you know what the risk is, right? You know what you're fighting against. And when you get the opportunity to take profits on the altcoins when they're up against Bitcoin, you make sure to do so because you recognize that the inevitable truth for most of the altcoin market is that they just simply bleed back to Bitcoin during the bear market year and during the pre-halving year, and also many times even during the halving year as well. Some of these altcoins can just bleed back to Bitcoin or just sort of maintain their prior lows. That's what ADA Bitcoin did last cycle as well. Maker Bitcoin, another great example. Just continuing to put in one lower high after another. And I mean, this is going all the way back to here, May of 2021 for this last cycle. And every single time we just put on a new lower high, and every single time it's nothing more than that. Theta Bitcoin, another great example, putting in new lows for this cycle as recently as this week. Okay, BNB Bitcoin is another example. I was looking at this one earlier today, and this is one that is it's not nearly, of course, the market cap of Ethereum, but it is fairly high up there. So this bleed here has also been a tailwind for the Bitcoin dominance to head higher. And what you'll notice is that it's just another series of lower highs. Solana Bitcoin is, again, no different. And this is one that has a way of moving sometimes relatively quickly and making people think that, this is it. But in reality, every single time it gets these rallies, it's just another rejection off of the bull market support band. And it hasn't been anything other than that for a very, very long time. History shows us we should not really expect anything to change for most altcoins until the third quarter of the pre-halving year. Okay, we can always cherry pick one or two here and there that'll bottom before then. Some altcoins probably already did, but a majority of them have not, in my opinion. Aave Bitcoin, another example, right? And it's recently coming back down to these lows. And again, inevitably, if it were to bounce back up and put in a new lower high, everyone would get excited. But it doesn't change the fact that it's probably just another lower high. AVAX Bitcoin is another great example of just a series of lower highs, sort of in this this triangle here, or sorry, this descending triangle. Lower high here, high, lower high, lower high, lower high. Now it's sort of breaking down. Guess where I got rejected from? I mean, you can zoom in and take a look, right? Where did the wick go? Right to the 20-week SMA. I mean, almost exactly. I mean, if you look at this wick, I mean, it's basically a perfect rejection here off of the 20-week SMA. And that's why I continue to say, right, a lot of these altcoins are just in systematic downtrends against Bitcoin. Matic Bitcoin is somewhat of an exception in terms of this long-term downtrend, but I would argue that Matic Bitcoin could potentially just be in one of these long distribution phases, just like we saw Bitcoin USD in 2021, just like we watched Ethereum Bitcoin do as well in 2022. And so I think that you could even make a compelling case that this is just a long distribution phase for the Matic Bitcoin pair, and the more likely direction for Matic Bitcoin is back down. Okay? So, and, it's sort of address some of the comments that I see, because I see these comments every time. Listen, one of the most common retorts that I see is someone talking about how this new 10 million market cap, micro cap, by the way, altcoin that was created last Tuesday has outperformed Bitcoin over the last week. I'm not really that concerned about that stuff, guys. I mean, the micro caps are not for this channel. This is the altcoin casino, okay? And I mean, sort of the argument is people say, well, there's always an altcoin moving somewhere. Yeah, I mean, look, if you go to the casino in Vegas and ahead of time what chips to put, where to put your chips when you're playing roulette, if every time, you can make money every single time. Just like in the altcoin casino, if you know which altcoin is going to go up massively against the US dollar or against Bitcoin in any given week, of course you can always make money, but the reality is it's impossible to know which ones there's going to be. It doesn't mean that you can't occasionally get lucky and see one go up, but the reality is by the time you hear about most of these altcoins, you're only hearing about them because they're already up a lot. And a lot of times they're just simply up because of the reality. A lot of times they're up is because some influencer was paid to promote it, right? That's the harsh reality, is that a lot of times they just get shilled up, and then what happens, right? People dump their bags and they move on to the next one. We've seen so many meme coins come out over the last 12 to 18 months, and every single time people buy into them, they think that these things are going to be the next best thing. And then what happens, right? They end up just coming right back down and essentially going to zero. And then there's a new meme coin the following week. And then people forget all the lessons they learned from the last one that they got rugged on. And then they repeat the same process on the next one. I've said before, right? The altcoin casino will remain open until everyone's lost their money. And I say that again and again because I have fallen for those mistakes, not because I'm trying to, sit up on a high horse and say, look, this is what I think is going to happen, was because I've fallen for these mistakes before of occasionally thinking like, oh, I was a good investor because I bought an altcoin and it's up 10% over the last year. And then I go look at Bitcoin. I'm like, well, Bitcoin's up 60% or something over the last year. And then I think, well, why did I buy the altcoin when I could have bought something so much less risky and it outperformed? Okay. And again, Bitcoin leads in the halving years, right? Like if we go back to a period of quantitative easing next year, in 2024, and lower interest rates, Bitcoin will lead that market, right? Bitcoin would lead that bull market to new highs. Okay, I mean, this is what we've seen happen time and time again, as Bitcoin leads it, and the altcoin market follows. The issue is that a majority of people join crypto after Bitcoin has made a parabolic rally, right? And so when they join, they don't see Bitcoin give any great gains because it took this parabolic rally by Bitcoin to bring them into the Cryptoverse in the first place. So then they just speculate on micro caps, and then they think the only way to get rich is to buy these micro caps. But there's also a way to lose all your money as well, is to just keep throwing your money into all these meme coins, only to just watch them lose value against Bitcoin on a almost everyday basis. So going back to the dominance, what did we say before, right? We put out so many videos talking about this parabolic rally for the Bitcoin dominance, talking about how it needs to break this 49% level. Ideally, I'd like to see it break 50%, if I'm being honest. Just get it to 50%. That would give it a little bit of wiggle room. This rally here, if you're curious, by the way, the Bitcoin USD went up in 2018 until the dominance was at 51%. Okay? Now, does that mean Bitcoin USD is going to go up until the dominance is at 51%? Not necessarily. It could go higher, right? I mean, it could, but the reason why 51% was the critical level, it's not because it was just 51% and it was just above 50%, but it was because it was above the prior range high. This prior range high was just below 51%. So by breaking above it, the altcoin market had broken on its Bitcoin pair collectively, right? So that's why I'm not saying that we need to, it doesn't necessarily have to pump until it's at 51%. This range high is at 49%. So, what I'd like to see is Bitcoin dominance get above this 49% level, hold it as support, right? And if it does, you will likely see some type of move like this, where it, hesitates for a while. And I'm sure, again, crypto Twitter will collectively lose their mind over it when it happens. But then what eventually happens is that it just continues to go higher. Okay? So, I do think the dominance will break out. If you look at things like the relative strength index, which, I mean, again, it's not, the RSI is certainly not something you should be taking to the bank, because again, they're not going to cash it in. But one of the things that this pullback has accomplished, right? If you look here at the dominance and the sort of the strength of this rally, you'll see time and time again, right, that it's just putting in higher lows on the daily RSI. There was a fake out right here. By the way, on ITC Premium, I put out an alert at this point, right, at 43%, saying, I think this is a fake out and we're likely going to shoot back up to the upside. And we did, right? I mean, this is what happened. This is a fake out, just to get everyone to think that it was going to break back down. And then we came back up. And look, I mean, we held support here once again on this upward channel. And what's interesting is that the current daily RSI is around 63. But the last time the dominance was at this level, the daily RSI was at 73. So what happened, right? What was accomplished during this time? What was accomplished? We cooled off the Bitcoin dominance. It had time to cool off a little bit. We brought the RSI down, sort of allowing it to reset to some degree so that we can continue higher. Look, it doesn't mean that we can't see the dominance pull back next week. And if it does, I'm sure my inbox will be full again. But again, even if it does, it's likely just a consolidation window, just like this was, and just like this probably is going to be as well. Okay, so could we last longer in this sort of consolidation range? We could. Don't know how long it's going to last. If you look at the weekly RSI, it's a bit more overbought. Okay, you can see it's at 72. But my retort to that is, so what? I mean, look over here in 2019. Which, I mean, a lot of people want to compare it to 2019. So why not look at it? Look at the weekly RSI back in 2019, where we went all the way up to a weekly RSI 75 and stayed there more or less from July until September. So you're talking about a several month period where the weekly RSI was at higher levels than it is now. So why can't the weekly RSI continue to go up? Right? I mean, I think it should be able to. So, this is and I continue to beat this drum because I think that it's an important lesson to learn. And by the time the dominance finally breaks this level, then you should still see. I mean, I think a lot of people think that their altcoins are done bleeding against Bitcoin. But again, once this is broken, then you can see this continue to move up very, very quickly. And then you can find yourself at around 60% dominance before you know it. And what used to seem like such a so improbable of occurring could eventually just seem like a very obvious or a very likely outcome. So I'm still looking to see the dominance break above 49%. I think that's an important level for us to break. And the beauty of it is that it should happen no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. That's the point. And that's why I said back in Q1 of 2022 that altcoins were too risky. I consolidated my own altcoins back to Bitcoin and back to USD because I said, look, I mean, consolidated back to Bitcoin as a hedge, because if Bitcoin outperforms, then at least you have something. Consolidate some back to USD, because if Bitcoin goes down, at least you'll be able to buy more altcoins with USD. But with Bitcoin, a lot of the altcoins are down 70, 80, 90%, right? I mean, again, take a look at ADA Bitcoin. I mean, this move here by ADA Bitcoin is an 81% drop. And some people might say, well, that's a lot, right? I mean, why does it have to go down further? Again, last cycle it was in the 95% drop. And you might say, well, these altcoins are better today than they were back then. And while that might be true for some of them, you're also sort of taking the position that you think that Bitcoin hasn't improved in any way, which I would argue there's been a lot more adoption of Bitcoin over the last 4 years. And so you shouldn't compare these altcoins to what Bitcoin was 4 years ago, but compare it to what Bitcoin is today. And I can't find a compelling reason to think that a lot of these altcoins aren't just oscillators at best and could easily come back down to the range lows eventually. So I will continue to hold this view. I will flip my bias probably later this year, and then I will take it from there. But we'll see if the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation continues to play out like I think it's going to, which should just be a fairly systematic downtrend for quite a long period of time. Again, with Ether Bitcoin, we're actually coming up pretty soon to a phase that really does not favor Ethereum, right? Another thing to look at is you look at the altcoin season index. We've talked about this before. I mean, we are really getting really deep into Bitcoin season. And it's been a long time since we were this deep into Bitcoin season. Look how long we spent in Bitcoin season back over here in late 2020. Look how long we spent over here in 2019, and look in 2018 as well, right? We haven't even gotten down to these lower levels down here yet, and we spent quite a long period of time at some of these lower levels, right? From August of 2018 until September at levels lower than where they are today, which means that the altcoin market could easily continue bleeding back to Bitcoin, for several more weeks at the very least, and it doesn't even mean that it's over then as well. You could look at this on a 60-day time frame and see that it's where again the altcoin market is still very severely bleeding back to Bitcoin. On a 30-day, it's not as bad, but still over the last 30 days, Bitcoin has outperformed 39 of the top 50 cryptocurrencies. Over the last 90 days, it's outperformed all but 4. Over the last 60 days, all but 1. So again, I mean, Bitcoin is to me, it's finding a compelling reason to show that the altcoin market is bleeding back to Bitcoin. It's likely going to continue bleeding back to Bitcoin. And the other thing to look at, as always, is to go look at the dominance, not including stablecoins, right? I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit. If you include stablecoins, it's at 48.53%. But I would argue that not including stables is a worthwhile exercise as well. It's currently at 52.9%. So, we could make the case that we need to break that level that we hit, not including stablecoins. In order to do that, we need to see the dominance go to around 55%, 55.3%. So another 3% from where we currently are. Okay, so that's the beauty of it, right? If Bitcoin goes up and breaks it, and then it comes back down, like if Bitcoin USD comes back down, the dominance should keep going higher. That's that's sort of the case that I've really been trying to make for quite a long period of time. And again, going back to that thing that I mentioned earlier about the Ether Bitcoin pair and how I think we're coming up to a period that is really unfavorable for Ethereum seasonality on its Bitcoin pair. I mean, you can see that on average, the first 5 months of the year, January through May, tend to be green for the Ether Bitcoin valuation, but on average, June through December tend to be red. I mean, and we have May coming up. May has always been green for Ethereum's Bitcoin valuation, except for last year. So, you could see a scenario where the Ether Bitcoin valuation continues to hold up for a few more weeks or something. But by the time, even in May, it could start to set. But by the time you get out to the summertime, I still think that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation will continue to bleed. And it'd be nothing more than a series of lower highs. So we'll see what the Bitcoin dominance does. I hope to see it break above 49%. If next week it's back to 47% or 47.5%, I'm not going to make another updated video. You guys are going to know my general view. I'll probably at least wait a couple more weeks. But just know this is a macro thesis. It has been playing out. And one other way to look at this, by the way, is look at monthly Heikin-Ashi candles for the dominance. I mean, look at this. Basically, no lower shadows, or at least if they are, they're very small. Large candle bodies and pretty large upper shadows. This is showing a fairly compelling trend by the dominance to the upside. And zoom out on this. Does this not just look like a massive double bottom for the dominance? Like, does that not just look like a massive double bottom? So that ultimately the dominance is going to go much higher? That's what I think it looks like, right? And we talked about this for a long time. That this is likely just a massive accumulation phase. Not that you really accumulate Bitcoin dominance, but you can at least not have altcoins and just assume that Bitcoin will go up. So that by holding Bitcoin instead of the altcoins, your purchasing power of those altcoins could go up a lot if the dominance continues to go up higher, no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. That way it hedges you some, right? If you're really unsure about what direction Bitcoin's going to go, but you want to have exposure to the market in general, having Bitcoin over the altcoins during the pre-halving years and the early phases of the halving years is a very good idea, as history shows us, not financial advice, but as history shows us, it's a pretty good idea because it allows you to eventually purchase more of the altcoins that you actually like just by holding some Bitcoin, and I think also holding some cash. So anyways, there you have it. I'm not going to continue to ramble on. I think I've covered what I wanted to cover once again. So let's just see if the dominance will break 49% here in the coming weeks. If it does, that should send some warning signals to the altcoin market. If you see the dominance above 49%, really above 49.2, and ideally, just getting it to 50%, I think getting it to that nice round number would be fairly ideal. Anyways, if you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. That sale is ending at the end of the month, and we do have plenty of different charts on the website. Honestly, we have thousands of charts, on-chain charts. We have obviously price metric charts for not only Bitcoin, but for a lot of different cryptocurrencies, social risk, social metric charts, macroverse charts, equityverse charts. The list goes on and on. So make sure you check it out, lock in the lower rate as long as you do not cancel, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.